Thank you very much for being here with us. It's a great pleasure, and thanks Pam and Jennifer for this wonderful tour to History Lane. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks very much for coming and being a part of this milestone for us. For me, it's particularly special, not only as a faculty. I'm also a proud alumni of MSNE. I was actually part of the founding class of MSNE when I was a PhD student in 2000. So I'm very, very proud, and it really means a lot to me to be here in front of you. And also welcome this wonderful panel that we're going to be discussing with. These are also distinguished alumni of MSNE. We're going to have a lot of fun talking about very interesting topics at the frontier of financial technologies. This is an area that, as you saw, is of strategic interest for MSNE. As Pam said, we had two recent hires we are very proud of. Ruiche Jia, who is, you might see him later in this afternoon in the activities, and Renjuan Xu. They work both, Ruiche in the centralized finance. We're going to be having topics on decentralized finance, and of course, generative AI. Renjuan works on that area. And these are very, very important technological sort of areas that have touched financial technologies. This department has grown significantly since the seeds that were planted by Dave Lemberger. So you saw Dave also in the History Lane, and so I'm super excited to be talking about this. So let me introduce you quickly to our distinguished panel. So Mike Kennedy, I think maybe the three of you should come now. And Mike Kennedy, he is the founder of Zelle. I'm sure you probably have used that peer-to-peer payment platform. It's super cool. He's going to have a better chance to introduce it. David Wu, who is an algorithmic quantitative trader at Jump Trading, who's a hedge fund that works in cutting-edge technology. And he's going to also walk us through the use of tech in finance. And Gustavo Schenkler, who is a professor of finance in Santa Clara University. He also has a startup and is very active in the area of decentralized finance. So we have a very, very distinguished panel, sort of like cutting across three very, very important areas of financial technologies, and we are going to have a lot of fun talking with them about this. So I think we could take a seat, and I will let you, introduce yourself. We can start with Mike. You can do a better job at explaining a little bit of what you do, what Zelle is about, and then we'll go with David and Gustavo.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. Very excited to be here. I am industrial engineering, coterm 94, 95. So very familiar with the university, with the department. I had a great time here. I've worked in both large and small for financial services. I was the CEO and founder of Zelle, which is the largest person-to-person payments network in the United States. I was also CEO of Interstellar, which is a blockchain-based international payments company. Before that, I got the other side of financial services. I was executive vice president at Wells Fargo, one of the three largest banks in the United States. So I got to see what it's like on the large side and the small side. And today, I sit on boards and do advising to startups. So I'm on the board of American Savings Bank, which is the third largest bank in Hawaii, and I'm also advising a number of startups, including FX, which is a great cross-border payments company started by a couple of Stanford graduates 2 years ago, and I've been advising them since they formed the company. So a lot of exciting stuff going on I'm excited to talk about.
Hi, I'm David Wu. I was an undergraduate here at Stanford with economics and MCS, followed by a coterminal master's in MSNE in 2010. Since then, I've graduated. I work at Jump Trading for been 10 years now, 15 years now, actually. And so, it's interesting because I only worked at one company, but the career trajectory has changed quite a bit from when I started into what it is now as a modern-day quant trading powerhouse.
All right, well, my name is Gustavo Schwenkler. I got my PhD here in 2013. I was an assistant professor at Boston University for my first job, and then I moved here to Santa Clara University, where I teach finance now. I'm in the business school, so I made the switch from engineering. I've been working in fintech both on the research side and in practice as well for the last 15 years. I'm super passionate about using technological solutions to make financial markets more inclusive and more accessible. And that's kind of what I work on in terms of my research and what I do at my company, which is an AI-powered crypto trading system.
Well, fantastic. So, as you can see, we're going to have an exciting conversation cutting across these areas. The department has created a financial technology lab, so that's also something that we are very proud of. It was created in the last 6-7 years. Part of the lab, I'm a proud member of the lab. Marcus Pelger, who played a very significant role in organizing this session. He wasn't able to make it today, but he orchestrated this. I'm just helping kind of coordinating the content. Kai Gisek, he's the director of the lab. Peter Glynn, who you saw narrating some of the history, is also a member of the lab. Gerd Infanger. And what we do in the lab is closely informed by what we see our alumni doing and what is at the cutting edge of the industry. And you're going to have a glimpse of that right now. So let's start with the first topic of the session. I would like to talk about innovation. So let me start with Mike. So talk to us a little bit about Zelle. Tell us a little bit about the context, how it entered the market in response perhaps to competitors like Venmo and peer-to-peer, how payments and the role of incumbents in this area of changing technology. I mean, what is it that you think are good strategies for incumbents, and what's the role of companies to kind of help kind of more established financial institutions? Maybe you might have a good perspective on that. So why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So founded Zelle in 2011. At the time, PayPal was really the only person-to-person payment option. And we realized that not everyone had PayPal, not everyone was comfortable giving them their financial information. So we thought there should be another way. People also didn't want to carry around cash and checks anymore. But at the same time, everyone had their phones. So how do you come up with something that's a better solution than what you have today? So we said, well, we can do this. The technology is pretty straightforward to build. But instead of having it be a third party, like PayPal at the time, Venmo was being created at the same time, Square Cash, et cetera, let's try to integrate it into the banks. Instead of taking on the existing financial institutions, let's partner with the financial institutions to something that would be mutually beneficial to both. And we think that worked out very well. We grew very rapidly to quickly become larger than PayPal within like 4 years, and have remained larger than all the other competitors throughout time. And I think that it brings up something when you say about the incumbents. I think that there's a number of approaches that incumbent financial institutions could take. One is to bury their head in the sand and say, we have great solutions today, we don't need to innovate. Those people are going to, over time, those institutions are going to have worse experiences than their competitors, and they're going to lose customers, so it's a bad solution. I would say the others that are going to innovate, they probably innovate in 3 major ways. The larger FIs oftentimes have large enough technology departments, they have innovation labs, they're going to build a lot themselves. The rest, and some of the larger ones will, the second way I would say is they buy it from some of their existing technology providers, such as Fiserv, FIS, who innovate themselves or get it from third parties. And the last, which is I think the most interesting, is when they partner with fintechs to jointly benefit. The fintechs have more of an innovation mindset. They can come up with new ideas, new things, develop them quickly, prototype them, get them out to market. But what they don't have is a customer base. The large FIs have a huge customer base. So if you can combine this new innovative things that will improve the experiences of your customers with your large customer base, it's a win-win for both organizations.
Fantastic. So yeah, right. I mean, it's what you're suggesting is like a complementary assets, right?
Exactly.
So the customer base and the ability to innovate quickly, right? So in that's great. And I guess something perhaps might be similar. I don't know, like in terms of complementary. What do you think is the role of a startup? So, like from your standpoint, David, in jump trading, right? What is it that technology has, how technology has influenced algorithmic trading and the quantitative trading, right? And potentially the role of kind of new technology, sort of how is that acquired, sort of like in that sector of finance?
Yeah, I mean, almost everything that we do at Jump Trading is financial technology, right? So coming in, we parse market data feeds from the entire world. We condense them into signals that we have to aggregate together to come up with a fair value for any and all securities that may trade. We had to do this at scale. We had to do this efficiently, not just for latency reasons, which the media likes to talk about, but also for our own research speed, right? We had to make sure that these models are up to date in a very timely manner, requiring us to have our own grid clusters and such. And there's a nice positive externality from that. Because we're a for-profit institution, we're able to kind of have a very large and aggressive R&D budget, really push the frontier of kind of the new technologies. And we're very, in some sense, like a lot of people are subsidized in the future because their industries, they may not have access to as much capital, but we've pushed, for example, NVIDIA, right, into expanding their CUDA offering to make sure that GPUs can be used for doing all sorts of matrix computations efficiently. And that has kind of opened the door to a lot of new technologies such as LLMs.
Exactly. That's fantastic. That's cool. So the way in which Jump Trading is approaching, as Mike was saying, it's so large that they can afford sort of investing in internal research and development. But you still sort of partner with universities, right? I mean,
I had a really great conversation with Marcus, and I remember very fondly my class at MSNE with Kai, Professor Kai Jacek. I think 444. I think it was about trading, and my little subgroup was very exciting. We all ended up going into algorithmic trading, and we did not agree about anything. But that's exactly the kind of people you want to get together, great minds, differing ideas, all with valid points. And the markets are ruthless, right? Like, nobody cares. It doesn't care about your ego. It's more important to come up with the right solution as efficiently as possible.
It's so important that in this time and age where kind of emphasize the value of universities, right? I mean, what discussions like that can bring to the table that later permeate into industry. Gustavo, you might have a take on that, being both a professor and also at the same time sort of being in a different section of fintech, decentralized finance. So what is your take about the interaction with these new technologies and how they are serving the financial tech sector? What do you think is interesting, is up and coming? What do you think is kind of more hype? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's very interesting because I do see both sides, and it's just fascinating to kind of live in both of these worlds. In academia, we have the freedom and the flexibility really to spend time and to think creatively about problems, right? Without the pressure that, say, the market will put on you if you have to come up with a solution. But in industry, right, you just get to test it right away, and you see results immediately, and you can make very quick decisions just by seeing how markets react, right, and how customers react. So it's really interesting to live kind of in the intersection of both of these areas and just try out a bunch of new technologies. So, I've been doing research on AI and investing for many years, and I practice it too. And I see some things that I'm personally really fascinated by, and also some things that I don't think are as exciting. I definitely think that using technology to make financial markets more accessible is something that's very interesting, and we see a lot of solutions in that space. So one thing that I'm, for example, really interested in is tokenization, kind of bringing all of these new financial services to the masses that previously was not possible. So that's one thing that I'm very interested about in. I think AI obviously has lots of potential, and I think partially, at least on the academic side, I feel like it's almost getting overhyped because at this point we know AI can do a lot of things way better than we can do before. But I really think that we should, as academics, really push the frontier of like what we can do now with this technology that we couldn't do before, and those are kind of the problems that I'm particularly interested in. That's
I agree. That's super interesting. And And I would like, since we are touching on the topic of innovation, I would like to get, and I'm sure all of us want to get your take about the elephant in the room, generative AI, right? LLMs and in general, that type of technologies. Like I would like to, this is unstructured. I don't want to kind of like force anybody to, don't want to point a finger, but whoever wants to kind of like jump in and sort of give an opinion about it.
Well, I know at Jump Trading, we've actually formed a subcommittee for LLMs and investigating it. Although we've been using AI of some form in trading for a long time, LLMs is definitely kind of a new technology. Some obvious ones were like, hey, news trading. Trump is on Truth Social all the time. What does he really mean? What is he really saying? What is the sentiment? But it goes on beyond that. I think a very exciting part is the ability for developers to achieve 5x productivity gains, right? You have to be careful. Instead of people writing code, testing it, reading code, deploy, reiterate, now you can kind of just generate code, right? And you want to be creative about how you design your unit tests and such. But in theory, if done all correctly, right, you can see huge gains. But there's going to be a lot of struggle, right? It's like there's a very funny graph I saw. It's like XKCD or Reddit or something, where it's like you use Gen AI to write code. It's amazing. And then it comes up with some mistake that is, doesn't hit you until later on. And then you have to kind of go and fix that and reiterate. So.
Yeah, I agree on that. I mean, I think Gen AI is amazing, right? It can do so many things. And I think one of the biggest benefits is that it really allows us to be much more efficient, not just in problem solving, but also coming up with solutions, thinking creatively about things that we don't necessarily come up with. But I think the downside and the risk really is in over-relying in a lot of these technologies, because they're ultimately just technologies, right? And they're algorithms, right? They are not perfect, right? And really, I think this is where, for example, for me as an academic, as a teacher, I also try to push my students to kind of focus on that, not just blindly trusting, essentially, what comes out of these machines, but also kind of questioning and building methods to test what the output is, to understand that it's working the way and doing what you want it to be doing. So I think that's an area where I think we can also push much further, is just not over-relying in a lot of these technological solutions.
Yeah, I would agree with everything both of you guys have said. I also think it's interesting, a lot of people may think about AI in terms of how can bad guys use it to do fraudulent things. It's also very good in financial services for fraud detection. So you can use it both to do bad things, but you can use it to detect people trying to do bad things. So I think fraud detection will be a huge area. I think that automating currently manual processes will be very helpful in. I also think one huge area of benefit is a lot of financial institutions have a plethora of products to offer. And being able to use AI in any channel, whether, say, think at a bank, at the teller, on the call center, at the online, mobile, so that when a customer is interacting with you, AI can analyze that customer, look at their demographics, look at others that are in those same demographics, others that have done similar types of transactions in the past, and offer up the best product that could likely meet their needs, as opposed to somebody just, having a hammer and thinking that everything looks like a nail, so the next person that walks in, oh, you should get a credit card. It's probably not the best product for everybody. So generative AI can help either directly, if it's a digital channel, or assist a human in what they should be talking to their customers about and helping out with customer service.
That's all of these are great points, and I think in some of the conversations, we talk about the power of the technology, sort of like making things faster, more efficient, but Gustavo and Mike touched on the subtleties of guardrails, sort of safety, trying to kind of have the technology be guided, right? I mean, and that is such an important thing. Like in MSNE, we try to, of course, inform the students with the latest of the technologies, but also try to ground them in terms of realities, right? One of these realities is perhaps is safety. We, of course, is taught by some of our faculty who are really, really in the field, like Gerd Infanger is also a part of the FinTech Lab. He has an investment firm, and the students get to kind of like apply these technologies, but also in the context of not only an algorithm, not only a mathematical formula, but how actually just it gets embedded in realities, practical realities. And safety and touches on regulation, and I want to switch to that topic now, from the innovation to kind of the challenges that you see, regulatory hurdles, and potentially also the needs, right, in terms of regulation in that sector, in finance in general. So what do you think? You know, it sort of relates, right? I mean, it's hard to kind of pinpoint exactly what, but there are in both ends, like challenges, right, but also needs, right? So who would like to kind of?
Yeah, I'll jump in on this.
Yeah,
So,
great. Yeah.
Regulation is actually very important, in my opinion. Not just for the reasons most people think of as regulation being important to prevent things going off the rails or bad things happening, but I was CEO of a blockchain-based crypto that used crypto for international payments. And it was fantastic technology. We got a lot of customers. But one of the things that we had challenges with in selling it to banks, for example, to utilize, is that the regulations in the United States are very ambiguous when it comes to cryptocurrencies. So it would actually benefit all companies, all the crypto companies, if there was better, more clear regulation. So we were actually looking to get regulation and get regulation that was very clear so that we could show to our potential customers, here's why we're falling within all regulatory frameworks. So it's actually the ambiguity in regulation that I think is one of the biggest challenges that fintechs face. I mean, people do talk about, oh, you can do regulatory arbitrage, whereas you can find some loophole because it's not very, but that only lasts so long. So it's actually better to have regulation. You don't want bad regulation. You obviously want it to be favorable, but even neutral regulation is way better than ambiguous, because then large companies will be hesitant to do business with you if they don't understand that you are clearly falling within the regulatory frameworks.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that point. It's funny running a crypto business and actually being pro-regulation. But it is definitely the case that this industry would operate much better, much more efficiently, and grow much faster if we had clear regulation. And not just in the US, right? I think in crypto in particular, it really requires a coordinated effort across the world because it is a decentralized system. Nothing just happens here in the US, right? It happens all over the world. And I think that's another big challenge that I see, is that without real coordination, like we could have the best regulation here, or Europe could have the best regulation, but there's always going to be loopholes, and it's going to take much more work than just figuring it out here. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in algorithmic trading, obviously, risk management is an essential part of the business, right? MS&E is actually very well suited because it can be posed as a convex optimization problem, right? You want to maximize utility subject to constraints, the risks that you find tolerable. But as a society, the utility of AI is probably well known and well defined. The risk is less well known. I think we just have to ask ourselves, what's the level of risk we want? And for everyone, it's a little bit different, right? And that's where politics and regulation get involved. Is we need to try to get people kind of on the same page of what are the real risks. And with that, right, the mathematical framework is there's a known solution. So we just need to ask ourselves, what are the inputs?
Right. I mean, it's quite interesting, I think, that what you said about, some regulation actually helps. It provides a degree of certainty, right? And decentralized finance is a great example. What do you think the role is of academia, for example, as a partner in kind of like exploring these types of solutions for social benefits, right? I mean, so this is kind of like maybe an interesting use case where maybe the questions are so open-ended that there is no clear sort of market solution. You first need to kind of have to jumpstart that process, have people thinking about the benefits of this type of market design, other type of market design. High-frequency trading is also a very interesting example where do you really want to have so fast trading that only you have a handful of players who have the ability to trade that fast, and then it becomes like a tiny arbitrage, right? Or would you like to kind of have something that just pauses that, and you have like more market participants? You don't want to kind of make it very slow because it's inefficient, et cetera, right? I mean, the same decentralized finance. And what do you think is the? I don't mean to bias you, even in terms of the response. I do have a thought, but I would like to hear what's your thought about the partnership between academia and the fintech area, not only about regulations, but about this kind of positive externalities that might not be profitable, right, in 1 quarter, 6 months, or even a year, right? But can be supported by people in academia, right, who thinking much more longer time horizons.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can.
I'm sure you have a thought. I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly the best research and some of the best applications are kind of developed jointly. It's really, really hard to have like groundbreaking new applications that are not somehow backed by proper R&D, right? And it's hard to do like R&D from ground zero in industry just because there is so much pressure and there's revenue pressure, customer pressure, market pressure, right? So it's really hard to do this. So I think in a place like MSNE, right, it's a unique place because the research we do is very applied, and kind of we are in Silicon Valley, so we have connections to a lot of companies that are interested in partnering. So I think this is just a unique kind of combination, right? And I think some of the best research is research that has real life applications, right? And I think that's a noble goal, and that's what we should be trying to push. Yeah.
I'm totally with you. But I would like to, do you have a sense? I mean, you're, more balanced and so on the other side, more.
Yeah, I mean, as someone that's not in academia, like the two that have spoken already, I think it's critical to have academic research. I think that most of the large breakthroughs, large things that have been developed in the last 50 years have been based on academic research. And so oftentimes what seems to happen is that there's academic research to develop a big underlying change, and then they start partnering with companies, large or small, where they can take advantage of that new technologies to bring it to market in a for-profit way. And I think that the for-profit companies would have a hard time doing all that research. I also think that the institutions, the academic institutions, would have a hard time then sometimes taking things to market without the for-profit companies. So I think it's a nice collaboration between the two.
I agree, yes.
Yeah, absolutely agree with both what Mike and Gustavo has said. Working in industry, there's tunnel vision, right? You have profits to chase after, you have projects to go after. It's always go, go, go. There's always the next big thing. Academia, with the perspective of looking backwards, you are less biased, right? You have research that's funding kind of independent of not contingent on your success in the short term. Second, you're able to kind of probe and prod at problems without any immediate effects. And that's very useful because people in industry are obviously focused on the here and now, right? But in the event of a regime shift or a dynamic shift, it's the academics who have just thought of a solution because hey, why not? It's just for fun, right? They're not for fun, but for research, which is fun.
Sometimes for fun.
Sometimes for fun.
Most of the time, in fact.
Yeah, they imagine certain scenarios of what could happen, and with very rigorous reasoning and theory, they go and build out a whole pipeline. Making a lot of assumptions, of course, but that becomes the rubric for later on if that world that was envisioned does manifest, right? This academic research is, where we will go as a society.
I agree. I mean, I have to say, hearing you speak and especially about this part of the fun and assumptions, right? So one of the, personally, I'm not a panelist, but I moved from I did a detour. I didn't just stay here after graduated, as I say, I was an alumni. I was at Harvard first, was a professor there at Columbia, and one of the reasons for being at Stanford when I came back was precisely kind of it's a very interesting sort of game that you play here at Stanford. It's one in which you have your academic freedom, you try to have fun, but at the same time, you are anchored into reality, and this is about assumptions, right? You try to kind of make things just closer to reality without kind of with still making it fun, right? That's a reality as a professor. You choose it because you love to think and things like that. So yeah, I think it's so important, and it's great to hear that there is this value of the connections between academia and industry. And you mentioned earlier, right, that jump trading is so large that they can afford to kind of have an internal research and development arm. But maybe they are investing on things that actually were spurred by academia, right? So things that look in the horizon that are profitable, but 20 years ago didn't look in the horizon, right? It's always like this lag, right, at some point. So that's pretty cool. I would like to leave some time to people to ask questions. Before we do that, I want to ask you a couple of things, more personal now, not about fintech. So can you share some story, insight from your journey, right? That you can remember, Stanford, my time at Stanford helped share this story, this insight, this part of my journey, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that personal side where you can connect your journey after Stanford with something that you experienced at Stanford? Who want to start?
I guess I can.
Right?
So personal stories. So I guess in terms of how something that happened at Stanford that shaped how we move forward in some of these other areas. I remember in industrial engineering, one of the things we had to do in a class I think I took my senior year was we had to come up with a business plan, and we had to develop a company and do everything, which was helpful in a number of ways. I mean, the most basic way was that it forced us to look at all aspects of a company as opposed to just say operations or research. So we were looking at finance and HR and hiring and technology and everything to see what all goes into forming a company, which was very helpful. And then I think it also helped to understand that when you're starting a company, you can't have a technology that's looking for a problem or forcing it on a problem. Instead, you have to find a problem and then figure out the best way to solve that problem. And that's the way that I see most companies being successful. And then lastly, and most importantly, it showed collaboration, because you weren't forming a business plan by yourself. You were working with a group of other students. You would have disagreements, as you were talking about earlier. You'd work through those, and because you had disagreements, you usually end up with a better solution because of that. This isn't a one-person show. No company that gets founded as a fintech is just one person that does it all themselves. There's always a team. One person might have the CEO title, but they have co-founders. They have other people that are making a lot of the great discoveries and ideas and stuff like that. And so you have to put your ego to the side and just say, this is all about coming with the best solution. And I think that by working in a team and doing a lot of projects in team, but this one I'm thinking of in particular, we came up with a much better idea and solution and drove forward with it by working with a lot of people.
I guess I have a kind of an analogy story. You talk about random things as a Stanford student, right? And so if we say fire is the technology, which it was back in the day, I feel like modern AI is like, who can build a bigger fire? And how do I use fire for defense against animals, right? Focus on these things here and there. But if you think back about fire now, probably the most profound usage of fire is cooking. Because with that, we can digest more protein. Our brains grew larger, and that became human evolution as we now know it. But back in the day, I bet we would just wanted bigger fires. And so, that's kind of the discussions that I remember having at Stanford that were more profound. It wasn't like hyper optimizing on the here and now. It's what could this be? How can I use this tool?
Yeah, I mean, for me, my time at Stanford was one of probably the best time I've ever had in my life. It was just such an incredible time to be open-minded, to just really take courses in all sorts of matters. It's amazing, and it really shaped me in a way. A lot of the research I do is interdisciplinary. The technology that we've developed at our company just takes advantage of so many different areas that I learned at Stanford. And just to give you one little example, so we run an algorithmic trading system, and it's powered by AI, so we don't really do anything. The AI just does it all automatically. But we needed to build a system to backtest in a way, in real time, kind of what our strategy was doing. And one of the things that we were facing was that we are not jump trading, right? We have very, very small budgets. So we couldn't afford to basically buy all the data that we needed to be able to backtest the strategy the way we wanted to. So all we were able to get basically is the open, the high, the low, and the close every day for the markets that we were tracking. And our strategy is basically real time. We don't just trade end of the day and open of the day. So I remembered that one time I took Peter Glynn's class and we were learning about stochastic processes and hitting times and Brownian bridges. And I've never used this in my life before until this time, where I just developed a whole simulation system that just simulates the data that I needed. And it's not perfect, but it does the job and it gets my backtest done, and it runs basically without very little effort, smoothly, gets my algorithms to basically learn. And I mean, it's kind of amazing, right? And that's just one thing where I took this class 15, 16 years ago, and it still kind of has an impact on the work that I do. So it's incredible, yeah.
That's really cool. So to summarize, it's about people, right? Critical thinking, but that's being able to interact, team players, and Brownian bridge. That's important. That's fantastic. So that's great. So now suppose that fast forward. Let's say let's do a thought experiment. 10 years from now. Actually, before we move to the future, right? Let's talk about the present. What do you think are the critical skills that we ought to be emphasizing in MSNE at this time? That we should be informing our students with. Of course, Brownian Bridge is going to be one of those, right? And to prepare them for the future, immediate future, next 5 years and 5 to 10 years.
I mean, I think maybe this is just for me as an academic, but I think in building in a level of skepticism is something that's going to be really important, especially going into the future as machines and AI become more dominant everywhere, right? There's going to be a lot of technology usage in all sorts of aspects of our lives. So really getting the new generation to just question, right? Question whether things are working the way they are, understanding what's behind the machines, really. We may not have to do a lot of coding anymore, right? Because coding can be automated. But we do have to understand how the machines are coded so that we know whether they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. So it's going to be a lot about kind of managing and controlling a lot of these big systems. And I think that's where I would think that that's where we should be kind of training our next generation and focusing on.
Yeah, I think with AI, right, the current LLMs have basically mined the entire internet. And so right now the question is all about where do we get good data? And so we may have to have our students think creatively about where can we source data. The internet has been exhausted. Should we go back to historical records? Maybe the past predicts the present. I think that's kind of true. Or maybe we have to look to alternative sources of data that we haven't even considered in mind. And so I think that's the innovation, is to be creative about what the data we look at is, because that's ultimately what will feed AI, and AI will do a better job than any person at analyzing that data.
So I guess I would say there's going to be a lot of technical skills that should be taught, and I think they'll be fantastic in the person's first job out of college. But I think that you also need to focus on making sure that our students are inquisitive, they have this critical thinking, they are always paying attention to what's going on around them and not just having a tunnel focus on this is the thing that they're working on, whether it's research or whether it's their current job. And also, you have to get out there into the world to see how people are using your products, and not just sitting in your office or sitting in your lab and saying, like, I drew this up on a whiteboard, so this is clearly the best way that it should work. You actually have to go out and see people using it and realize, oh, in theory, that's how it should work, but that's not how people actually interact with things. So being inquisitive, getting it out there, and actually seeing what the real world utilizes your stuff.
Intellectual curiosity,
Yep.
being mindful, aware, and that subsumes the data, right? I mean, you just realize, I mean, we need more data, yeah, and using the tech. That's fantastic. Thank you. I will making the recording, having notes. Okay, so let's see. Well, one last thing about the future, and before we go to questions about from the audience, let's say thought experiment. When we have this conversation in 10 years, we come back, very young as we look, same, and we have this conversation. What do you think we're going to be talking about?
I don't know, whatever the next thing is after AI. I mean, there's always a trend, whether it's
Quantum,
machine learning, whether it's blockchain, whether it's AI. In 10 years, it'll be something different. And so I think we all just have to continue to be open-minded and find the next great thing and continue to move society forward.
I'm kind of a futurist. We might not be doing anything, you know. If AI works out the way it is, and you know, we could have paradise. That would be the greatest. But most likely, what Mike said.
I like your answer.
Yeah.
Wow, I mean, maybe what I wish we would be talking about is how we actually use technology to help people get access to financial services better, in a better way than we already do. There's a lot of solutions like Zelle already that try to do this. I'm half Venezuelan, my whole family uses Zelle, right? It's an incredible system. We need more of these things because there's still areas where parts of our population really don't have access to good enough financial services to get them to save enough for retirement, to like have banks, right? To be able to save, right? And this is something that I think is gonna be important, and I wish we would see more development in this area.
Well, we'll look forward to the future. So I would like to spend some time, I think we have 3 or 4 minutes, 5 minutes, for questions from the audience. Jeff, here. Wait a second, just we need there you go. Yeah.
Has AI improved the ability to detect financial fraud, to improve compliance with the U.S. Know Your Customer regulations, and to detect possible indicators of financial transactions to terrorists and countries of concern?
Yes, everyone was able to hear that, I assume. Yeah, I would say that AI has definitely helped in that area. Unfortunately, there's bad actors that are using AI to make it harder to detect what's going on. But in terms of KYC and all those areas, AI has been helping. Now, have all institutions utilized the advances in AI? No. But I think that's an area that more and more institutions will utilize AI for fraud detection. And I think that the technology has been improving in that area.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi. You know, when I studied at EES, what it was called back then, almost 40 years ago, we used, I love the modeling tools that we used, nonlinear modeling, and you know, the really cool techniques we use. And of course, it stressed the computation abilities of what could really be done. But I'm curious, using LLMs and AI, what is maybe some new ways to think about modeling? In particular, for you, David, relative to jump trading and thinking about the markets, you know, one of the interesting ideas I've heard about theory of the mind, where you start to think about if you could model every one of the, say, 100 million participants in the market, and think about what their mind is thinking, and think about what they're reading and what they're feeling, and actually modeling them with an LLM, and then ask the LLM, what are they going to do tomorrow? So think about modeling more as a LLM kind of behavioral, emotional thing. What kind of work could be done there with AI?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and actually it's something that not a lot of people realize about markets, is that, you know, a lot of people think of markets as like physics, something to be solved. But the markets are the aggregation of all human activity, right? I mean, humans through maybe robots nowadays, but like it's still a human intent, right? Wants to buy, wants to sell, they make decisions. There is a lot of emotion. There's a notable skew in the markets between calls and puts. You see it everywhere, right? It's not rational, and yet it is there. It is actually observable in the data. I can't speak too much about our current research efforts, but this is absolutely something that we are investigating. Is you know, not necessarily LLMs because that's for text data, but transformers, which is the underlying technology, to kind of say, you know, we want to predict what's the next token, right? Where a token is an action of a market participant. There's a lot of details and a lot of infrastructural costs and related to consuming all the data and actually harvesting, just as OpenAI has done. But that's absolutely kind of a lot of the new future of how we're going to think about modeling financial markets.
Yeah, and if I can touch on that too. So an LLM really is a language model, right? So it just generates language, but the underpinning model is a deep neural network, right? It's just a big, massive, deep neural network running on big computer clusters, right? And we can use these models to model human behavior, right? And that's exactly where, for trading, you get predictive power. You don't get predictive power because you look at the data and you can identify trends. You get predictive power because you're able to predict human behavior. That's ultimately what drives predictability in financial markets. So I think these are exactly the kind of tools that are going to start pushing trading in a different way, right? It's not just about modeling trends. It's really about modeling human behavior. Yeah.
Well, I mean, thank you very much. Thanks. I want to thank, yes, please. We had an amazing, thank you very much for the wonderful conversation,
Yes,
for taking the time to be here. You all are very, very busy. And thank you as well for being a part of this. We had a wonderful conversation talking about the future, about your journey, about tech, the different, three very, very important slices of the sector. And this reflects the future of the fintech area at Stanford. Thank you for your support. Thank you once again. Pam, you want to say something?
I also want to thank all of you, including Jose, for facilitating this, and Marcus, who put it together. This has been just a wonderful conversation. I hope that it can continue into the break. We're going to take a 30-minute break and be back here at 11 o'clock to hear about AI and operations research. So thank you again.